It's great. Welcome. Trying to look halfway decent, but I don't know how to do any of this. This is all very new to me. I'm hoping now that I'm streaming directly on the YouTube app that I'm not losing a whole bunch of frames in this. So this is the fourth try for my first live stream. I want to tell you all a little bit about myself because this is a new channel and a new project that I'm working on. And I think that there are a lot of gaps to fill. So my name is Alex. I am a software engineer by profession. I've spent the last 10 years of my professional life, well, 12 years or so of my professional life, largely in a very niche technology field, building websites for large corporate conglomerates. These are like multi-million-dollar websites. The technology stack that I've been working on for the last decade or so has been mostly .NET and Microsoft. It's in a niche content management system called Sitecore. And so I've been working as a technical consultant and architect and engineer for Sitecore and these large enterprise Microsoft web applications. And it's I find myself out of work through no fault of my own, but it is what it is. And I've been looking for jobs, and I think that the state of the job finding market is a little different than it was 2-3 years ago. I've been employed for about 3 years, so I haven't looked for a job in 3 years. And back then, I could send out a resume and have a job application, but now there's AI interfacing with everyone at every level, and it's very, very, very difficult to actually get your resume in front of a pair of human eyes. So I'll continue to apply for jobs, and I'll probably get something at some point, but for now, with all this spare time, I decided to work on my own project. People ask you, well, what is it you love to do when you're looking for a new job or career? And I kind of already do what I love to do. Let's step into where my life is at now, because so far I've only told you that I'm a software engineer, but the entire thumbnail on this is living an off-grid life in Central America. And yeah, that's what I love to do. I live in Central America on the side of a volcano, and just right at the base of a rainforest, essentially. And I live 30 minutes up the mountain, so I have to carry all my supplies, all my food that I don't grow, up the volcano 30 minutes each day. Well, generally about each day I go down. It's very quiet. It's very tranquil, and I love it. I have this a little bit more than 5 acres of land. I'm turning it into a farm. I've got probably 100 different edible plants and fruits, vegetables, and I have chickens, so I'm getting lots of eggs. And eventually, one day, I want to more and start slaughtering my own animals. Right now, I get all of my meat from a local butcher who I'm friends with. And so all of my food more or less comes from within a few miles from my house. And I think that that's a very valuable aspect of what I consider to be a healthy life. So I have these technical skills, but I live on the side of a volcano in this little off-grid bamboo house that I built. Um, and I try to eat a healthy diet. I think we all do our best. I fall short all the time. I Right now I'm specifically trying not to eat any flour or refined sugar, or really anything that's like highly processed, and just stick with simple grains, rice, and meats, and then some nuts and fruit. Mm. I don't want to buy any food that's had to travel across the planet to get here. So I'm trying to buy only vegetables that come locally. All of our garlic that you can buy at the little stores comes from China, pretty much. Every now and again you get a local garlic, but it's pretty rare. So I'm growing my own garlic, but we'll see. We'll see if it bulbs on its own, or if I have to take it out of the ground and dry it off and cold stratify it. These are all these little details about living on a farm that you learn along the way, because I never had any farming experience. I mean, now I'm learning as I go, and that's sort of like a theme for my life, learning as I go. I think I've leaned into that a lot, and it's been a very useful tool. Taking risks and not being afraid to try new things and to learning as you go. That has been a very powerful tool in my life, because for a long time I just lived where I came from. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and the well, I wouldn't say I had a great youth. It was pretty chaotic, and I had always been a computer nerd, so I spent a lot of time on my computers, but I got swept up in drugs and the opioid epidemic back in my late teens and early 20s. And that, I don't want to say stole a decade of my life, because honestly, I'm glad that I went through that. Those stories are insane, and we'll certainly get to them at some point, because I want you to know who I am. But yeah, a decade of heavy drug abuse, more than a decade. And I got sober at 29. Oh, Zeus, come here. What happened? Did you get bit? It's my puppy's second birthday today. Happy birthday, Zeus. Someone just got bit by an ant or stung by a wasp. Come here, babies. What's the matter? What happened? That's what you get living on a farm. So, software engineer. I live on an off-grid farm on the side of a volcano in Central America. I grew up in Boston, and my late teens and 20s were just mostly drug addiction and popping around from different job to different job, all more or less in the computer programming, web development industry. But back then I was not able to keep jobs very long, 3 to 6 months maybe, and it gave me a lot of sort of new technology skills. I was exposed to a lot of different technologies in functioning production systems. And so I developed, through those years of drug addiction, a very versatile and adaptive skill set, both in technology but also in life, because a lot of it was just trying to survive. In fact, my twin brother didn't make it out alive. My sister didn't make it out alive. And most of the kids that I grew up with that got swept up in the opioid epidemic did not make it out alive. And so I became very adaptive. I became very stubborn in a way, just push through to the next step, to the next, I don't know, just basically clawing my way through life. Now, I got sober at the age of 29, all by the grace of God. I had tried on my own a lot of times, and that does not work. Maybe it works for some, but these big drastic changes like getting sober, as far as I can tell, I mean, it requires something outside of ourselves. I mean, something internally, I think, can be a catalyst for the change, but I would never have been able to do it alone, getting sober. So when I was 29, I wound up in treatment again. I had wrapped my car around a telephone pole, and that was, yeah, that was not ideal. But it, it wasn't like a particularly low bottom for me because I had a car to wrap around a telephone pole, which is like drastically better than the life I had lived years before that. And so there was nothing specifically about that time that would, like, it wasn't the lowest bottom I had ever had. And I don't know, there was just something about that time that was different than the rest. And for whatever reason, when I found myself in treatment, I hit my knees and I prayed to a God that I did not believe in. And I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulder in that moment. I had, I guess, what you would call a spiritual awakening. And I fully surrendered. I said, I think in my heart, like, I let go, like, I can't do this on my own. And not only will I ask for help, but I'll allow other people to help me. Because I think that's an important distinction that I had to make back then. I had asked for help lots of times, but I wasn't necessarily willing to receive it. So this time I was, and I went through Alcoholics Anonymous and did the 12 steps with a sponsor that is probably one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met on this planet. Now, I'm not involved in Alcoholics Anonymous now, although I did kind of get increasingly involved for many years after I got sober. But eventually, my life kind of moved in different directions. When I got sober, I got my first, like, really good job that I would keep for a few years. It was at a digital marketing agency, and I was taking a large corporate website and we were converting it from open source technologies. It was written in PHP, which I had a lot of experience with. And we were building them a new website on this content management system I had never heard of before called Sitecore. And so I was at this company, this large global marketing corporation, that I started learning this content management system, getting more involved in .NET and Microsoft services. And that sort of started my career on that path. And I started doing a lot of cycling when I got sober, and then also found rock climbing at the rock climbing gym. This is not something I did not know rock climbing was a sport prior to getting sober. And then a friend invited me to the rock climbing gym, and I just sort of fell in love with it. So My primary hobbies back then were cycling and rock climbing, but at the gym, not outside. And I was working at this marketing firm and learning these new technologies. And after a couple of years of that, I ended up having enough skills to go out and get a job specifically in that niche market. And I found a job at a technology consulting firm, also in Boston, and they needed a Sitecore developer. And I had now had a couple of years of experience on that, and so I came on and started working as a developer for this consulting firm. And one of the interesting things about this consulting firm was that we never really worked in the office in Boston. We'd go in a couple days a week, but for the most part, all of our clients were in other cities. And so there was on site work and not and off site work, essentially. Most of our time was off site, but every few weeks we'd have to get on a plane and go travel to Minneapolis or Seattle or somewhere. And so this sort of was the start of my traveling consulting life. And there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know how many people have ever been sort of exposed to this corporate travel world where you've got platinum credit cards and everything goes on this, and you're racking up endless points, and you get to eat at all these crazy restaurants, and you get all these credit card points for it, and then you just get paid back for it, and it didn't cost you a thing. In fact, you made money on going out to restaurants you normally wouldn't pay for yourself. So I spent a few years doing that. After 3 months of working for that company, I was introduced to a guy at the rock climbing gym named Connor, and Connor was living in a Mercedes Sprinter van. And in that moment, it just, I had an epiphany. I knew that I wanted to live in a van. That was like the thing that really called to me. I had never thought of it a day in my life before. But after years of being a drug addict and then getting sober and like just having spent time living in I don't know, 100 different types of places, right? Jails, mental hospitals, detoxes, halfway houses, sober living environments, just apartments with regular people that like had no idea that I was so messed up, and just living on streets, in drug dens, and in cars. So I had lots of experience with just kind of living in weird settings, I suppose. And when I saw Connor's van, I was like, this is it. I must live in a van. Now, in 2025, this is all a little crazy, or a little played out, I think. Everybody lives in a van now. Van life has come and gone, and I think that in many ways nobody's interested in it anymore. But in 2014, 2015, when I was getting this idea and building out a van, nobody knew about van life. I had never heard of it before. I had never seen anyone living in a van. And so, yeah, it really just sparked something in me. So I started obsessing about this, and I asked my new boss, can I live in a van? And just when I have to go to a client site, I go to the nearest airport, and I park my van in long-term parking, which I would have done anyways if I had to drive to the airport. And it'll be about the same cost, and I'll always be able to get my job done. And so that was 3 months after I started working there. And my boss kind of reluctantly agreed, under the conditions that obviously I got my job done and I always showed up to work. And I worked for that company for another almost 3 years, traveling the road in the van. And It was great. I didn't have any problems with it. The only thing, the only reason why I left that company at all was because in 20, so I got that job in, okay, 2015. So in 2018, the end of 2018, that company started saying everyone needs to be in an office. And so all of us remote workers, whether digital nomad like me or just people working in their homes, all had to start going into the office at the beginning of 2019. And so I ended up leaving that job and getting another job eventually, but just in the same industry, working for another consulting firm in the same niche content management system, Sitecore. But at that point, I sort of wound up in Mexico. And there's so many stories here to get into, but a seed had been planted in me one day about living in a sailboat. And it had just been planted in me. I never gave it a second thought after it arrived. And I had been living in the van in Oregon, and I broke my shoulder mountain biking. I broke my clavicle, and I was like recovering and trying to figure out like what on earth am I going to do once my shoulder gets better. And I decided I'm going to learn how to sail. This seed sort of sprouted in a recovery period, and I said I'm going to learn how to sail. And so working for this company, I take time off. I go take a 1 week sailing course. I've never stepped foot on a sailboat before. But this was in I feel like 2017, maybe early 2018. And so 2017 it must have been. So I go down to Mexico to learn how to sail, and it was amazing. I had no idea what I was doing. I feel like I learned so much. It was such a great experience, but something just told me that the van wasn't sustainable enough. Like there was no way that I could live a truly like meaningful existence just living in a van. Something told me that maybe a sailboat is a little bit more like a home, a little bit more sustainable. I mean, in my head, I was thinking I was never going to use an engine, essentially. I'd be traveling on wind all the time. How naive of me, huh? If anybody's ever lived on a sailboat, like this is not a luxury you get. I mean, unless you have the luxury of time where you can literally just stay in a place until the wind is going to take you in the direction that you want to go, you're going to use your motor so much. So didn't end up being as sustainable as I thought, but I bought a sailboat, a 45-foot sailboat in Mexico, and I sold the van, and I moved down to Mexico with this sailboat, and I started fixing it up. I bought it in Sonora, which is on the mainland side of the Sea of Cortez, but I was actually kind of living in Baja California Sur in La Paz. So I actually, the day that I bought this 45-foot sailboat, having never done a full water trial, like a full testing, I only did a dry survey of this boat. Because of Mexican law, I had to move that boat from Sonora to another state, but La Paz, obviously Baja California Sur was where we were going to go. So it's essentially like a 150-mile journey, having no sailing experience, basically, certainly no captaining experience, to get this boat across the Sea of Cortez. But we did without too much incident, and then I started fixing it up in La Paz for a few months and upgrading it, and I was working. At that point, I was living in a little apartment and just working online for the company I was working for. And the dream was to go across the planet on this sailboat. I was going to sail to Tahiti and Fiji, and then down to Vanuatu and New Zealand, and do that whole thing. Eventually, wind up in the Mediterranean. Who knows? But it's the end of 2019. I've got a couple crew members in Baja California Sur. We're like, all right, we're going to sail across the world. So I put my dog, Zoe, with my family back in Boston. And the boys and I sail across the Sea of Cortez to Mazatlan and down the port of Vallarta, and we start getting ready for this jump across the Pacific Ocean around March, April at the latest, hopefully, in 2020. And I think you all know the story. COVID happens, and I never left Mexico. I eventually left Mexico, but I certainly did not sail to Tahiti, which thank God, because a lot of the people that wound up there had to park their sailboats offshore for months and couldn't set foot on land for months because of COVID lockdowns. So I feel very blessed that I didn't have to get stuck in that environment. And now looking back on it, I know that it was meant to be, because in many ways, COVID opened my eyes to the fact that something just wasn't right. We all have different opinions on this subject and many others, but something just didn't feel right. I think I always knew it, and that's why I never really led a conventional life. I just kind of knew something wasn't right, that everything was kind of built on bullshit. It's like, I was growing up, I was in elementary school, middle school, and these teachers would say things, and then you'd ask a question or you would correct them based on your own independent studying. And in my experience, they'd often get very defensive. And I just saw in my own family and every sort of authority figure around me that everybody was just sort of full of crap and trying to push people into believing what they believed. And so then COVID really just blew that wide open, and it just seems like now it's probably a good idea to just live a simple life first and then incorporate all of the chaos and complexity in as I choose, as I see fit. And so, I didn't know it then, but I spent COVID and after COVID for 3.5 years just sort of making my way down the Pacific coast in Mexico. I had gotten a girlfriend at the time, so she came along with me for a lot of that. Me and Maria and my dog Zoe, and we just kept going south essentially. El Salvador, Guatemala, El Salvador. When we never stopped in Guatemala, but we did almost get stopped by the Navy. That was pretty harrowing, honestly, because it was at night in a lightning storm and just trying to get through it safely. And the Guatemalan Navy decided to stalk us in the night. They were just looking for a disabled boat who was some friends of ours. But it's funny because we had already known that our friends got to a marina safely, but for some reason the Navy didn't. But they decided to stalk us anyways. We landed in El Salvador, traveled around there for a while, and then continued further into Nicaragua. And so after Mexico, El Salvador, and traveling around Nicaragua, in Costa Rica, I went down to Colombia with her to see her family, to meet her family, and then we came back to Costa Rica and Nicaragua, Central America, and we broke up, her and I sort of just took the sailboat and went sort of down to Costa Rica and stayed there for a while, back and forth between Nicaragua and Costa Rica for a while. And that was sort of a nice vibe. We spent a year kind of just down there in southern Nicaragua, northern Costa Rica, Guanacaste province, and got to know a lot of people. Really was just kind of feeling this solo boat life out. And I think I realized in many ways that it just wasn't for me. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just not as sustainable as I like. It's like a really hard life living on a sailboat. Constant work, constant maintenance, and yeah, I just felt that it wasn't for me in the end. And so I ended up deciding to buy some land, start a farm. So 3 years, a little more than 3 years ago, I bought some land here on this volcano and I started planting tons of food, and it's been great. I have a lot, but there's so much more to do, and I just want to live this healthy lifestyle where I have fresh air and fresh water from fresh mountain springs and food that I grow that I know is not sprayed with chemicals, and I know it doesn't have to be transported halfway around the planet just to get to my door using how much diesel fuel, you know? So I personally am not a Luddite. I love technology. And so I spend a lot of time on my computer. And now that I'm out of work, I'm trying to find this balance between just hanging out on my farm and trying to find a job or produce something. And so that's sort of where this whole Yoga Encyclopedia channel comes into play. Like I really want this to be a place where I can bring my own sort of experience and wisdom to people in a way that might be useful. I have never lived a conventional life. I have, I think, perspectives that are fresh and different than most. And I also just kind of have an overall attitude and personality of someone who is just very much someone that goes by the beat of his own drum, I think. And so, I haven't lived in the United States for so many years. Like, I don't even know what people do there anymore. I don't know what life is like there. Like, I talked to a few people there, but I don't really get a good understanding of how everyone lives in the developed world. I live a pretty, I don't want to say primitive life. There are people that are building their houses like without any help and using hand tools. And I'm not about that. I have an amazing off-grid solar battery setup with more than one generator as a backup. So I feel very good about my balance between off-grid, sustainable, and then also relying on modern technology for comfort. And, you know, I don't know what I would do without hot water. So I'm building the yogaencyclopedia.com in my spare time. And it's going to be partly about teaching yoga and wellness practices, and partly a place to just go to get away from the noise and the chaos of our modern world. I mean, unless you really, really, really feel like you need to listen to the news and politics, I think it's probably not terribly productive. I mean, it's not productive for me. I know when I'm pulled into that type of content online that my overall mental health suffers. My overall ability to stay active suffers. Sort of my mental energy gets preoccupied, and then I don't prioritize other areas of my life that like are important to me for just general health and wellness, like movement and exercise and spending time thinking about good food and where it comes from. So I don't know what the website will become. It can't just be a sterile educational platform, Because one, I'm not an expert on yoga. I don't have any certifications. I've never been to India, and I've never studied in an ashram. But I do have a life of experience, and I do think I have something to say that at least overlaps yoga pretty well. The philosophy of yoga, the movement of yoga, and then the focus of yoga, which is to meditate and to have a better connection with a higher power. You don't need to be religious. I'm not religious, but I do have what I would consider to be a very good relationship with my higher power. I mean, it started long before yoga. And in many ways, I don't even practice yoga the way that like truly expert practitioners practice yoga. But I find value in it, and I want to bring yoga, meditation, the philosophy behind yoga, and breath work and music to everybody, because I think that these are sort of the things that I love about my life, being able to have a relationship with my body, my mind, and my spirit in a way that allows me to go out in the world and be the kind of person that I want to be. Honestly, I don't catch myself as much these days saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have said that," or "You should have behaved differently." Like, I feel like those are qualities of a past life of mine. I feel like I'm really coming into my being and being someone with a strong word, a strong system of values and principles, a leader, a protector, a real man in my community and in this modern era. And I think that these are important values to share. I think we need more of that. And so as I build out content on this website, I'm going to share more about myself and my stories with you, so that I hope I can bridge a lot of gaps between what is this sort of professional life of mine, this product or brand that I'm building, the Yoga Encyclopedia, and who I am as a person, who I am as a man, and what it is I want to do in this world. Because I'm not building this product, this website, to get rich and hoard it for myself. In fact, you'll hear me preaching a lot that I think we should share our abundance with everyone around us instead of saving money. I think that investing in people is way better than investing in banks and mutual funds. And so I guess you'll see who I am and what my attitude is about this. Hopefully, this product starts bringing in some subscribers and some income for me. And you'll see I'll use that to transform my life so that I can be of more service to others, that I can build projects that enrich the lives of a lot of people, not just myself. And that when I have an abundance of money or time or love, that I share that with the people around me, because I know that one day I will be at a deficit of these things and I'll want someone to share them with me. So sort of that's what this is all about. Nothing crazy, simple, straightforward, and authentic. This is about taking you away from the things that distract you and bringing you in towards things that just improve your life in little ways every day. So I'm Alex. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll see you here at the Yoga Encyclopedia.